Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the recent slew of changes overhauling the turtle ship. If you read over the April patch notes, this is the wall of text that no one wanted to take on.
We're not going to read all that. Yeah, just rockets, whatever. Armor. Yeah, it's just basically they reworked the turtle ship. We're going to have to see how it works in game.
I don't know what these changes mean. I have to test them out, guys. So no comments so far.
There's different attack rates and damage now. So there's big changes to the turtle ships overall, which I can't really dive into until we test it.
Okay, this is too many changes to understand how it would work right now. 6 damage, 7 against buildings, too many numbers, too hard to understand right now.
Clearly someone has to do some number crunching to figure out what exactly it all means, so I volunteer as math nerd to do that. The reason it's a tough overhaul to understand at first glance is not just the raw number of changes that can be overwhelming, but the fact the patch notes don't give the current values for things like attack and armor, to know if things generally are even going up or down. The stated goal is to make them more effective against galleys and more vulnerable against demo ships, though I suspect there's a typo in this, or there was just an unforeseen consequence, as it kind of misses the most important implication. To start with a quick overview of the unit, this is the Koreans' extremely expensive and pop-efficient unique ship that superficially blends aspects of the galley line and cannon galleon together, with previously a medium-range cannon attack dealing 50 melee damage. A lot of what makes them really good though is a lot of hidden ship armor, which almost fully negates incoming damage from galleons and caravels, for example. If anything, this aspect is actually improving, with their pierce armor going up by 2 for both non-elite and elite. Simultaneously, the elite turtle ship's hidden ship resistance to anti-ship bonus damage drops by 1. This is a net positive against things like castles and galleons, a slight negative against spear units who deal bonus but not pierce damage, and for most other things, it's just a change we don't have to worry about. In addition to tankiness, the unit's other major advantage is unlike nearly every other type of ship, they dealt only melee damage. That made the unit not just tanky against the galley line, but also very hard hitting against things like fire ships and docks that have high pierce, but little to no melee armor, which flags a potential problem for turtle ships now that they're switching to firing some arrows and dealing pierce damage. The way their new attack works, instead of a 50 melee damage attack once every 6 seconds, they now fire every 2 seconds through a 3-step loop, with a charge attack for the cannon dealing much less melee attack than before, but then 2 rounds with 3 arrows, or 5 arrows after their expensive unique tech, dealing 6 pierce attack and 5 anti-ship damage for each arrow. In total, if armor isn't involved, it actually ends up being more damage than before, though remember ships generally have high pierce and sometimes ship armor that now gets involved. What we need are some good old-fashioned scenario editor tests, keeping in mind the original turtle ship did 500 damage per minute, so let's see what it is now when it's all put together. To start against a war galley in Castle Age, amazingly or by design, it all works out that it's still 500 per minute. You have the 20 melee attack pass right through, and then 2 rounds of 3 arrows, all dealing 5 versus ships, and all we really get is a more exciting battle with more arrows in action. There are some subtle advantages and disadvantages to the change if we want to nitpick, but overall they come out in a very similar spot in Castle Age and a little harder hitting in Imperial Age against galleons. Moving on to the demo ship, which remember was supposed to be what they're more vulnerable against, at least from a damage perspective, we do see about a 12% reduction over time, though it's not like the turtle ship is necessarily lacking teeth here. The real problem turtles have now is fire ships. After a great initial cannon shot dealing 20 damage, the arrows just do the minimum, cutting our damage over time roughly in half from what it was before. Even in Imperial Age, with the extra arrows and more melee attack for the elite version than what it had before, it's still a 30% drop against fast fire ships. We also see a reduction against pikemen and other low armor land units by about 20%, but clearly the big story here is turtle ships now do way less damage against fire ships. So those are the mechanics of what's going on, but of course we have to take the next step and see how this actually plays out with some units head to head. And luckily I just did a turtle ship deep dive about a year ago, so I have examples of how they did before the changes, which we can compare to. For some reason, I chose to make Koreans purple in that video, and I'll use green this time to help contrast the before and after, though the updated graphics will make at least the Imperial Age tests pretty obvious which are the new ones. To start with the galley line, the big story here is not our turtle ship's attack, which stays basically the same, but instead the war galley's damage is cut in half. Previously, they did 4 damage per attack, but with the turtle ship's new pierce armor buff, that's reduced to just 2. Unquestionably, that makes them significantly better against war galleys now, and where previously with balanced resources 4 versus 11, the turtle ships ended with about a third of their HP left over, now with the same numbers, they have 70% of their HP left. The claim they're better against the galley line is definitely confirmed, and maybe even a little understated. Nothing major changes in Imperial Age either, aside from 5 more melee damage and 2 more arrows from a unique tech. Whereas it was actually pretty close before when we gave the Galleons a proportional numbers advantage, the elite turtle ship completely cleans up now, thanks to both doing a little more damage, as well as still taking far less than they did last time. They're also arguably harder for Galleons to micro against, now that elite turtle ships have just 1 less range than a Galleon after siege engineers and their unique tech, which now gives them +1 range, though you also lose the effect of ballistics now, so that may be a wash. But that's the upside for the unit, and what about those pesky fire ships? Well, here things are not as rosy. They still take just 2 damage per shot from fire ships like before, which is just half of what war galleys take. So their tankiness is still on par with 3 war galleys after HP factors in, but their attack, as we saw earlier, is now roughly cut in half. With balanced resources, that used to mean a group of fire ships would only win by a modest amount, and if I microed the turtle ships, I could even sometimes win. That's how close it was. That is not the case anymore, with fire ships now jumping from 23% to 67% HP left in the same test. That's maybe a surprisingly large jump, but remember doing half damage means every fire ship lasts longer, and therefore does more damage over its lifespan, so there's a bit more of a snowball. While turtles still do more damage overall than a similar group of galley line units, the fact that devs didn't mention fire ships in their notes is a bit of a surprise, though maybe they figured turtles were already weak to fire ships, so it wasn't worth mentioning. Or maybe this was an unforeseen effect of what they were trying to do in nerfing them against demos. On that point though, I find the interaction with demos doesn't seem that much worse to me. It takes the same amount of time for one turtle ship to destroy a demo as before, since they previously needed 2 cannon shots, and now require a full round plus a second cannon, which is the same total time. They're still ahead of war galleys, while they then take the same amount of hits from demos as before. So with a 4 turtle versus 8 demo ship situation, it plays out exactly the same. The other miscellaneous unique unit interactions are then largely the same after the turtle ships changes, where they beat elite caravels and elite longboats with balanced resources, having a little more armor, and doing a bit more damage in Imperial Age. The Risidae are somewhat of an exception because they resist anti-ship bonus damage, so the turtle ships end with 63 instead of 68% of their HP left over, but it's still a great trade. As for some secret bonuses that were added against buildings in Siege, it turns out they do about 40% more damage against docks lacking masonry, and roughly the same damage as before after that tech, so are situationally better at taking those out. Against Siege, they actually do worse though, as despite a new bonus on their arrows, no other damage actually gets through. A little lost in the shuffle is they also end with 1 more range, as their Imperial Age unique tech was made quite a bit more expensive, but gives +1 range to both rocket carts and turtle ships. It didn't really factor into these sorts of tests I did throughout, but going from 8 to 9 maximum range is pretty nice for bombarding the shore. I also want to briefly touch on naval compositions that include turtle ships, and how I think they're impacted by the changes we've seen. Turtle ships can be fine on their own, but particularly because they're shorter range than galleons and longer range than fire ships, they line themselves up naturally in some pretty handy ways. One combo would be galleons behind your turtle ships, which I think if anything is even better now against opponents using largely galleons. The turtle ship is now so much tankier against those that, for example, where previously 3 turtles and 9 galleons against 18 galleons would win, it's a better result if we do the same test now. On the other hand, another good pairing if you foresee a lot of enemy fire ships is turtle ships to back up your own fire ships, but this is far less effective now than it used to be, since your turtle ships are dealing much less damage. With balanced resources, it still wins against a generic fire ship and galleon mix, but against a good fire ship civilization like Byzantines, I feel like fire ships make for a tough matchup now. Remember, Koreans lack the demo line entirely, and turtle ships used to be your secret weapon because of their high DPS, whereas are just nowhere near as potent anymore. So those are the changes to the turtle ship, leaving them in a bit different place than last year. If they were good before, they're now great against the galley line, though are far worse against fire ships and marginally worse against demos, doing it all with a bit more visual pizzazz. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.